after 4, and we will call this meeting to order. I'd like to welcome everybody here tonight, and we will begin with introductions, beginning down here on this end. Introduce yourself and who you represent.
My name is Greg Young for the County of Madera.
Dave LaQuashi, MID.
Tina Nolan, MID.
Bill Jansen, Madera Water District.
Eric Abrahamson, Consultant, Madera Water District.
Derek Robinson, City Council, Madera.
Keith Helmuth, City Madera.
Andrea Sandoval, MID. Malcolm Copel, Cal State Sacramento.
Julia Van Horn, Cal State Sacramento Facilitator.
Oh, here he is.
Stephanie and Agneson, Madera County.
Pete Lafleur with Ludorf and Scalmanini on the GSP consulting team.
Brent, you want to introduce yourself since you were late?
Brett Frazier, tardy member from the Board of Supervisors, Madera County.
Thank you. Item 2 is public comment for items that are not listed on this agenda. Is there anybody that has comments on items that are not listed on the agenda? All right. Okay.
So this is Stephanie and Agneson, Director of Water and Natural Resources. Putting on my flood control hat, I wanted to let people know that there is a list of sandbag locations and sand that's out by the door. You can pick it up. If you'd like to know where to get sand and sandbags, you do need to bring your own shovel. And on behalf of the county GSA only, we do have an advisory committee that is accepting applications until December 13th. There are applications out by the door as well. You need to live or work within the county GSA. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 3, comment summary, next steps, and coordination committee discussion. Who is?
Do we have a, yes, we have a presentation.
We need about 30 seconds to get the presentation from here to there.
Okay.
We anticipated more public comment.
Okay.
It's gonna be a short meeting though.
Okay, so again, this is for the joint GSP public comments received, and that represents the 4 agencies that sit up here today. So again, Madera County, City of Madera, Madera Water District, and MID went together on a joint GSP for the Madera Subbasin. We received public comments over the public comment period, and this presentation and this meeting today are to go over those comments that were received. So the outline for today's meeting is we're going to go over the GSP background. Again, just to familiarize everybody with the GSP. We will then go into the comments that were received during the public comment period, which ended November 9th. The response to all of the public comments that were received, within those responses, there were multiple subject areas that were covered by numerous comments, and so those were broken down into subject areas and responded to as a group. And then we will go over the next steps related to the GSP.
Okay, part of what part of the background is what is a groundwater sustainability plan. The groundwater sustainability plan, it's currently in draft form, as I think most everybody knows at this point, is a new document that's required by the state that was developed to demonstrate how groundwater sustainability will be achieved in the subbasin by 2040. What this graph illustrates is that over the course of 20 years, between 2020 and 2040, that will be the implementation period, or it's also been referred to as a glide path. Over that 20 years, we'll be implementing projects and programs that are designed to reduce demand for water, also actually put in conservation methods, and also to recharge. How was it developed? It was developed with the support of 2 grants. One was a $500,000 grant for stress basins from the Department of Water Resources, and also with the support of a $1.5 million grant also from the DWR. Local technical experts and a consultant team drafted the GSP. They incorporate feedback from the public, which will be addressed a little bit later in this presentation, the Coordination Committee, and the Groundwater Sustainability Agency boards throughout the development. Throughout the development of this, there has been outreach through multiple meetings. This shows pictures from various meetings and also workshops. On the next slide, we'll show some of those meetings. We had technical workshops. The Coordination Committee met 3 times. There were multiple workshops, and then this technical committee met separately to review the methods that were brought into this process.
All right, switching over to some of the more details on the GSP as shown as a draft document at this point. What we see here on this slide, you see the entire subbasin outlined in red, and then there's some shaded colors. The purplish color is the Madera County GSA that sits within the Madera subbasin. The kind of light blue is the Madera Irrigation District area. In the center is the city of Madera, and just north of the city of Madera, you see kind of a dark blue or darker blue, and that's Madera Water District. Those 4 GSAs have prepared this joint GSP that we're talking about today. There are also 3 other GSAs shown in this graph, or in this figure. There include Root Creek Water District GSA, Newstone, and Gravelly Ford Water District. Those 3 entities have also done separate GSPs that are not part of this joint GSP. In total, the subbasin is about 350,000 acres, and about a little over 216,000 are irrigated. Within Madera County GSA, there's 180,000 of those acres, and 85,000 acres of that are irrigated. Within Madera Irrigation District, Madera Irrigation District, numbers aren't on here, but it's about 130,000 acres and about 120 irrigated, a little less than that, 108. One of the keys there is in the Madera County GSA, there's a significant amount of acreages that are non-irrigated, and that's unique to the county GSA. The other participants in this GSP are predominantly irrigated lands within their service area. Next slide. From the broad perspective of what this plan intends to do is to reach sustainability, we need to do a combination of things. We're going to bring more water in and try and capture that through recharge, and we're going to do significant demand reduction. As noted in the bottom of this slide, the majority of the demand reduction is going to be occurring within the Madera County GSA, as it has limited resources only to the groundwater, other than trying to pursue a couple of recharge projects. So you see here on the left-hand side that there's about a little over 100,000 acre-feet of demand reduction on groundwater, and the majority of that is within the Madera County GSA. The rest associates with some lands coming out to build recharge ponds throughout the subbasin. On the right-hand side, you see the added 60,000. That's the average annual benefit of recharge that we anticipate. However, that's going to come infrequently, and it's going to associate with high flow conditions when we can try and capture those flow conditions and recharge. So there's significant infrastructure to allow recharge to occur every 3 or 4 years in order to get an average annual benefit of around 60,000 acre-feet. Next slide, please. What this graph shows is an illustration of what we anticipate throughout the subbasin. And what this really is showing is that during the implementation period between the two green bars, so 2020 to 2040, we are going to be doing demand reduction through a kind of a incrementally increased amounts of demand reduction, again, predominantly within the county GSA area, and at the same time building recharge projects. And with those two actions, we anticipate some continued reduction in groundwater, although at a much slower rate than would happen without the planned projects. And then after 2040, we intend to be at sustainability, and you can see this blue line that starts at 2040, a horizontal blue line that's represents kind of the average condition between 2040 and 2090, which is the sustainability period that the law asks you to assess. And what that's showing is that some years we might be using more groundwater and other years we might be using less, but overall we're going to be trying to operate to that groundwater level. And this graph is on the vertical axis groundwater level, and the horizontal axis is time. And so what we're showing with that management objective, that blue line, is where we're anticipating to try and operate this basin at a sustainable level. Next slide. So without the planned projects and management actions, we do anticipate that there would be greater groundwater impacts, and that without the GSP, we would anticipate groundwater levels on average would drop another 100 to 150 feet by 2090. But with the GSP, groundwater levels may only temporarily drop in the 20-year implementation, but are expected to stabilize by 2040 and into the future, as was shown on that graph. Next slide. Because there may be some implications of that reduction and that lowering of groundwater occurring in the implementation period, the GSAs are considering a mitigation program that could to try and address impacted drinking water wells. There are efforts underway to try and address how this is going to occur. One of the things is applying for a $500,000 grant to obtain a better inventory of all the domestic wells that exist throughout the subbasin. And then we're working with an ad hoc group right now through the county's advisory committee to start identifying how a structure may be put together for a mitigation program. Possible actions could include replacing or lowering existing wells, connecting to community water systems, and potentially staging and having availability of temporary solutions if something were to occur. Again, I want to emphasize that the intent and the management objectives are to actually have a better condition than we even have today, or at least the most recent low period in the groundwater levels, so that we don't anticipate having impacts to domestic wells, but in case there are, we want to try and develop something that could address those impacts. Support could come in the way of low-interest loans or grants, and we likely are going to need the well owners to sign up for a program, since we really need to know where the domestic wells exist so we can try and address those impacts if they are to occur. Next slide. I'm going to hand it over to Eric now.
Okay, so this summarizes the comments period on this slide. Informal comments began with the release of the first chapter, the draft chapter 1 of the GSP in April 2019. And then there was a formal 90-day comment period between August 7th and November 9th for the entire groundwater sustainability plan. In addition, there was a listening session where both verbal and written comments were taken on October 22nd this year. And after the plan is submitted to the Department of Water Resources, there will be an additional 60-day period where the public can comment on the plan through DWR. Next.
So just a little bit about the comments received. You see some of this is 1 of 2 slides where we list all the comments received. Some of the comments came in April when we opened it up with the first public comment period. We've got about 30 total comments, including from private individuals, different agencies, non-government organizations, and I think even some private companies. Let me go to the next slide. Okay. I'm going to go back one. Did we skip one? So here's the rest of the comments received. So I guess we can go forward now. I didn't see that slide. So response to public comments, just the comments were received were reviewed by the GSP consultant team, GSA technical experts, the GSP plan manager, the GSA coordination committee members, GSA elected representatives, and the GSP grant manager. What we did with the comments, the consultant team went ahead and put the comments all in a spreadsheet. We looked at all the letters, assembled them all into a spreadsheet, then organized them into subject areas so that we could, for subject areas where we had multiple comments, then we were able to handle those for kind of an efficient response. And then we looked at comments outside of the subject areas we responded to in the spreadsheet. And the responses were developed by the consultant team with input and review by all the comment reviewers. We go to the next slide. Why the documentation of the response to public comments is included in the GSP as Appendix 2.c.e. And we list all the comments received, so the comments on the first two slides will be listed. Then we have a section where we cover the multiple comment subject area responses. So for each of those areas, we respond to those. Then we have basically the spreadsheet becomes a table in this appendix that includes all the comments and then the responses to those comments. And then the last part of this appendix basically contains the complete text of all the comments received as they were received. So we ended up with 7 subject areas where we found multiple comments. The demand management reduction program. Then we had groundwater dependent ecosystems, surface water groundwater interactions, outreach, including disadvantaged communities and severely disadvantaged communities, subsurface inflows, groundwater quality, groundwater levels related to domestic wells and subsidence. So if we go to the next, so we got one slide for each one of these areas. So for the demand management reduction program, why a summary of the comment was a main comment was the program lacks details and that we should initiate a stakeholder process. I would also state that the comments ranged from we should do demand management faster to we should do it slower. So in response to that, why we've written, I mean, basically a stakeholder process is underway with the details being worked on by the Madera County GSA with input from various groups, including the Madera County GSA meetings, the Madera County Advisory Committee for the county GSAs, Madera Coordination Committee meetings, discussions with Madera County Farm Bureau and the Madera Ag Water Association. So through this stakeholder process, why the details will be fleshed out for that program. So the next slide.
Okay, so moving on, groundwater dependent ecosystems. Some of the comments requested to clarify methods used to identify GDEs, analyze potential impacts to GDEs, consider potential GDEs in setting sustainable management criteria, including sustainability goals, MOs, and MTs. And then there was one comment that expressed appreciation for the comprehensive evaluation of potential GDEs in the sub-basin and appropriate use of tools and guidance recommended by Nature Conservancy, which we really appreciate because we had a consultant on our team whose sole job was to evaluate groundwater-dependent ecosystems. So there was a significant effort devoted to this. So in response to the comments, we clarified methods and analyses that were done and how potential GDEs were considered. in setting sustainability goals, measurable objectives, and minimum thresholds. So there's some revisions and additions to the GSP text on that topic. So next. So surface water, groundwater interactions, some of the comments indicated insufficient characterization of the issue, insufficient description of data gaps and how they'd be filled, and basically disagreement with the conclusion that surface water and groundwater were disconnected in the subbasin. So again, there was actually quite a bit of analysis put into this that's documented in the GSP using the available data. So there's some additional text to clarified methods and analysis and the availability of data. Essentially, we can only work with the data that's available to do these analyses. There will be ongoing data collection related to this, including some of the nested well work that we're doing to look more closely at shallow groundwater levels. So this is a topic that'll be looked at, in the coming years as more data is collected. So next. So comments on outreach about providing more information about beneficial users, including disadvantaged communities and severely disadvantaged communities, and to describe more how they were engaged. So more text and some revisions to the GSP were added to address these comments. So next slide. So on subsurface inflows, some of the comments express concern that subsurface inflows are being calculated using an uncalibrated groundwater model, and concerns just for historical ongoing inflow, net subsurface inflow from adjacent subbasins, Delta Mendota and King subbasins. So basically in response to that, the GSP actually documents in quite some detail a high level of effort put to the calibration of the numerical model, which is included in Appendix 6D. So it's a calibrated groundwater model that's being used. As far as subsurface inflows from adjacent subbasins, our analyses show that those are going to be significantly reduced as we implement projects and management actions. And so that's something that's really, I think going to be addressed through the implementation of the GSP. And I think it's in terms of looking at the model results on this topic, I think it's most important to look at the relative changes, looking at what historically and currently we see happening versus what we see happening in the future once we reach sustainability shows, significant decline in those net subsurface inflows. So next is groundwater quality. So quite a few comments on that, including the need for additional constituents to be included in the plan, clarify the source of water quality MTs or how those were set, clarify differences in monitoring sites for water levels as opposed to water quality, clarify potential for groundwater contamination for domestic wells, and risk of GSP activities to groundwater quality. So I think the first thing actually in the second bullet under the response there is that it's really important to note that primary oversight for subbasin groundwater quality issues is really the responsibility of the Regional Water Quality Control Board and the State Water Resources Control Board. There are several programs in place to work on addressing groundwater quality issues in the basin under those entities. And that going back to the first bullet, so the primary responsibility of the GSP as it relates to groundwater quality is really on three primary issues. One is regarding movement and spread of known contaminant plumes due to GSP projects and management actions. So, the idea is not to, alter that or exacerbate that. Second is impacts that are specifically related to declining groundwater levels, such as possibly arsenic, so that's addressed. And then third is potential for flushing of contaminants that already exist in the vadose zone related to recharge projects, so flushing those vadose zone contaminants down to the water table. I think it's important to recognize there that while there could be some temporary increase in those constituents moving down, but those already exist and they're on their way down. So ultimately, there may actually be a benefit from these recharge projects in that regard, even if there is a temporary increase through dilution with the recharge water. So those are the three issues that are addressed and will be sort of monitored as part of the GSP related to groundwater quality. So next. So groundwater levels related to domestic wells. Comments include questions about the estimated number of domestic wells being impacted, being too low, input from disadvantaged communities and potential impacts on domestic wells were not fully considered, and that groundwater level MTs and MOs are too low and do not protect domestic wells. So in response to that, I'd really like to emphasize that the GSAs and the consultant team have seriously considered all the input we've received on this topic from disadvantaged communities and other beneficial users. And it's important to recognize that there's differing opinions on groundwater level MTs and where they should be set and what's the significance of those. And it's also important to recognize that minimum thresholds are really designed to work in conjunction with the domestic well mitigation program. And also that the minimum thresholds are not really, that's not where the basin is intended to operate. It's really, you want to look more at the MOs and the interim milestones as far as where we expect the basin to be operating. And so third, is that the alternatives that, such as immediately reducing the potential decline in groundwater levels, with a significant demand reduction right off the bat would have very significant and sudden economic impacts to really all beneficial users in the basin. So I think it's important to recognize that. And then, not on the slide, but I think it was indicated earlier, there are planned to be additional studies on this topic. That I think the database we have to work with has some limitations. So a grant has been applied for by the county for $500,000 very recently with DWR to conduct the domestic well inventory. So there's more to be done on that topic. So next. So the final of the major areas was subsidence. And so the major comments there were that the GSP should set sustainable management criteria, that the GSP is not in compliance with SGMA due to lack of establishing sustainable management criteria, that the GSP should discuss subsidence along the east side bypass, that western Madera County adjacent to Delta Mendota should reduce pumping in the lower aquifer. So, basically on that, although it's true that specific sustainable management criteria have not been set, that it does provide for ongoing and close monitoring of subsidence, and there are triggers for adaptive management in the future related to subsidence. So it's still getting a lot of attention in the GSP and in the implementation period in terms of looking at subsidence. So it's important to recognize that. So I think with that, we'll move on to the next slide. I think Greg is taking.
Thanks, Pete and Brian, for that overview of all the comments and how they've been addressed in the GSP. So wanted to just touch on some procedural steps here so everybody recognizes what's going to go forward from here. And first, that at this meeting, there will be a consideration by this committee for a consensus recommendation to each of our elected bodies to adopt the GSP. So that will be something that'll come later in our meeting. Then also, each of the GSAs will officially consider adopting the GSP at these various dates shown on the slide, with Madera Irrigation District scheduled for December 17th, Madera County also scheduled for December 17th, Madera Water District scheduled for December 11th, and the City of Madera scheduled for December 18th. Each one of those adoption considerations will carry with them opportunities to give public comment, and the recommendation from this body will be put forward to each of those elected bodies here before those meetings. Then the GSP will be formally submitted to the Department of Water Resources, considering adoption by all the parties. It will be formally submitted to DWR by January 31st of 2020. Then DWR will, once they have accepted the submission, they will have a 60-day public comment period that the state will be issuing, and the comments will be directed back directly to the Department of Water Resources at the state. So that's just a quick overview of the next steps of this GSP, which has been a couple of year process, as was noted in several of the earlier slides. With that, I think that concludes our presentation, and we open up for public comment on this, correct? I don't want to take the chair's job.
Correct, yes. Is there any public comment on this agenda item?
Hi there. My name is Amanda Monaco. I work with Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability. I know my colleague Madeline Harris is usually here, but she is out sick. So I came instead because it had been a while since I'd been here. So I wanted to just address a couple comments that were made regarding some comments. I know that staff and everyone here has done a lot of work on this GSP for the last couple of years. And I do want to acknowledge that hard work and lots of time and effort and lots of meetings that went into this. We still remain concerned with the amount of domestic wells that would go dry based on the minimum thresholds in this GSP. According to our analysis, it could be hundreds of wells going dry. I know that was not the conclusion that was reached by the GSA. So we would hope the GSA would look more at that analysis and strive to avoid those, prevent those wells from going dry in the first place, because any mitigation program is going to be it's not, a mitigation program will be great, and we will be engaged in helping shape that program. But ideally, these agencies are here to also avoid critical impacts on drinking water resources. Regarding groundwater quality, we do definitely agree with the assessment that was made that groundwater quality, the obligation of GSAs is not to regulate groundwater quality insofar as regulating what's put into the groundwater. That's other agencies' jobs, but it is to prevent movement and spread of contaminant plumes. And our request was to add more constituents to the basically the monitoring list. So having more constituents be monitored so we can see really what the impact is on many contaminants, more than the fewer that were identified in the plan. So thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other comment?
Paul Provenzano from the Bonadelli Ranchos area. And I'd like to echo the comments of the previous speaker. And I'd also like to thank Stephanie for setting up the meeting that we had to clarify some things. I did have one additional question, and that particular question was, when you look at the recharge areas, they seem to be rather concentrated at various points in the county. And I'm wondering if it's a belief of the engineer that those recharge areas or that recharge water will reach everybody in the sustainability areas.
Thank you for your question. So I'm not the engineer, and I'm sure engineers will jump in, but the recharge areas that we chose were chosen for their access to water supply. And I don't think that they're evenly distributed throughout the county. They're distributed in locations where they can access water from the bypass or with agreements with the Bureau of Reclamation for water from the canal. So it's not an effort to distribute water equally as it is kind of an engineering task to figure out where they could best get a water supply.
Thank you very much.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's basically right. So I think that, so I don't really have anything to add, so thanks.
I would just add that I don't think we know where all the recharge areas are going to be yet because, a lot of the on-farm recharge, hasn't been specifically identified where all that's going to happen. So, we have to make certain assumptions for now, but, there's still a lot to be determined about exactly where the recharge, all the recharge is going to happen.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Thank you.
One more?
Good afternoon. Angela Islas with Self-Help Enterprises. Definitely do appreciate the opportunity to publicly comment on this item, and just wanted to maybe highlight a few things just to show some appreciation. And definitely I do appreciate that on the item for outreach, there was a consideration in adding more language to kind of really buff out the overall methodology on being able to publicly engage residents during the implementation process of the GSP. But I do want to just make sure that not only with providing more info for beneficial users and then also describing how they could be engaged, I just want to make sure that with this board that there is a consideration to review our comment letter to really kind of specify more on, what public process we would really want to see happen. And definitely Self-Help Enterprises has collaborated with Madera County in performing many workshops, as we've shown many of the photos to prove of that. We do want to make sure that with the consideration of the latest workshop that we've had with Parkdale and Parkwood residents, there was a lot of expression with just really making sure that there is an opportunity for there to be a more transparent process and being able to have the materials be uploaded maybe a day or two ahead of time. We do have maybe one resident here today at Parkdale who was interested in being a part of this workshop. Unfortunately, with the materials not being available, we weren't able to really help her kind of be able to engage properly in this process with today's meeting. So I do want to really make sure to highlight that that is an importance for us to really make sure that with next year's implementation and for residents to engage properly, there would be a consideration of having materials be uploaded ahead of time. But other than that, I do really appreciate that the consideration for the update on the outreach component and looking forward to really seeing that being implemented for the GSP next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right, we will move on to the, oh, sorry.
I'm just going to try to be quick. My name is Lisbeth. I also work for Self-Help Enterprises. I just want to second regarding the minimum thresholds for groundwater levels and groundwater quality. We do appreciate a lot the initiative that all the GSAs within Madera had to develop the mitigation program. We recognize that Madera GSAs, they really have set up a really good framework that we have not seen in other GSAs, so we appreciate the efforts to develop and implement that. I just want to highlight that we self-help partner with Leadership Council to conduct a technical analysis, and we have seen a pretty big impact to domestic wells and small systems. So if it is possible to take in consideration that, potentially reassess why the numbers presented by our technical analysis differ so greatly from the numbers that the GSP is presenting, and potentially review the minimum threshold or including, let's say, like a more strong schedule to when to implement and develop the mitigation program. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you. No other comments. We will move on to item 4, which is stated as a vote on recommendation for adoption. But I was told that we don't have to have a vote, that we are a consensus committee according to our charter. And so I'm looking for a consensus amongst us to say that, yes, we are going to take this forward and recommend that our particular GSAs approve this at their upcoming meetings. So I guess we're supposed to do the thumbs up, thumb down, thumb sideways, Dave?
Can we show it behind the screen or something? Right? No.
So it looks like we have a consensus to take this forward to our individual boards, and we will be doing that and moving forward in this process and get this submitted by January 31. Is there anything else? Greg?
I just wanted to note that it just looks like somebody is getting set up for some translation services back in the lobby, and I didn't want to close out if there was something because of that time delay of doing that we were precluding anything. So just wanted to note that, Chair.
Okay.
I don't know if we need to ask for comment again, or
Yeah, we're getting ready to close the meeting out. Is there any further public comment? And there will be additional public comment periods after the plan is submitted through DWR, so there will be additional times to make public comment. And yes, and at each individual GSA board meetings.
Maybe we can put the dates back up. If you can put the slide back up, they can see the dates for those GSA meetings in case they want to attend the GSA meetings and make public comments there.
I don't know if each of us wants to address the timeline. I know there's a date on there, but I want to say when that is occurring. I know the county is scheduled to start at 10 o'clock in the morning on the 17th. Is that correct, Stephanie?
Yes, the county GSA meets as part of the Board of Supervisors. The meeting starts at 10. You may want to plan a couple of hours, though, because it may not be the first item on the agenda.
The MID open session will start at 2 o'clock, and the GSP component of that should be shortly thereafter the beginning.
Madera Water District meets at 9 o'clock, and I would imagine it'll be one of the first things on the agenda.
City of Madera meets at 6 p.m. City of Madera meets at 6 p.m. It is part of the city council meeting. It will probably be shortly after 6 p.m., but I can't guarantee it all. We will try to go ahead and put it at the beginning of the agenda. Our staff will attempt to do that.
Okay, if there is no further comment, then we will be adjourned. I guess so our charter's been met. I don't know what the next step on this is.
Thank you, Chair.
Good job, Bill.
Thank you.